Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I'm going to be previewing the UEFA Women's Champions League upcoming group stage matches that will be starting this coming Tuesday and Wednesday. Now, last Friday, the draws were finally made, so we now know who's going to be playing each other in each of the groups, and there has been a lot of discussion about the matches as well as some of the scheduling that's come out as well. So without wasting any more time, let's just get straight into looking at the groups. So first up, we've got Group A that has Olympique Lyonnais, Wolfsburg, AS Roma, and Galatasaray. In Group B, we've got Chelsea, Real Madrid, SC Twente, and Celtic. In Group C, we've got Bayern, Arsenal, Juventus, and Vålerenga. And then finally, in Group D, we've got Barcelona, Manchester City, Hammarby, and St. Polten. Now, right off the bat, when I look at these groups, definitely Group A and Group C are standing out to me as the groups of death. I think between these top three teams in both of these groups, I think it's pretty hard to say who are going to be the top two that make it out. I think it's going to be a fight to the death, and so I'm very excited to see that. So let's just start off with Group A because these four teams are actually playing on Tuesday. So first off, one of the first two games will be Lyon versus Galatasaray. Now, obviously with Lyon, these are the queens of Champions League. They're the 8 times winners, last year's finalists. And so every year, you're always going to pencil in Lyon as favorites to win, as one of the favorites to win this tournament. Now, they had a very interesting offseason. I think right off the bat, Tabitha Chewinga, what an incredible signing that they were able to get, stealing her from their rivals, Paris Saint-Germain, which is not the first time that has happened. But Tabitha Chewinga was last year's player of the season in France. She also won the Golden Boot with 18 goals. And so imagine that the team that finished in the finals last year in Champions League has upgraded basically the best player in the league last year. So this was a massive get for Lyon. And I think they needed it because they kind of had a little bit of some disappointing news in the offseason with Delphine Cascarino and Gretchen Bach basically changing their minds. They initially had committed to re-signing, and then both of them in the summer had decided to change their minds and sign with other teams. And so I think being able to sign Tabitha Chewinga essentially salvaged what would have been a pretty disappointing summer for them. Selma Basha also had surgery in the offseason, and so she is still out. And so it'll be really interesting to see how Lyon does. They've had a good start to the season. They haven't played the toughest competition, though, and so I think these Champions League matches will be very interesting to see how they do. Now, when it comes to Galatasaray, first off, I just want to say congratulations to them. There have been previous Turkish teams that have made Champions League when it was in the previous format, but in this group stage format, Galatasaray are the first ones. This is, of course, their first year in Champions League. And so I know for them, priority is probably going to be getting and gaining experience, getting used to the raise in level and the raise of intensity that is required to participate in a tournament such as Champions League. One thing I really like about this team is that they're primarily a Turkish team. So most of the players are from Turkey. And so what that tells me is that even though it may be quite difficult for them to do really well in this tournament, like who knows? But obviously this is going to be a difficult tournament for them, but they're going to gain a lot of experience that hopefully they can carry with them to the national team where a lot of these players play. And so then we're going to start to see in the international stage, the European stage, hopefully we can see Turkey benefit from this. We've seen this with Spain and Barcelona, the rise in level and dominance of Barcelona carried into the Spanish national team. And so that's what I'm hoping can come out of Galatasaray's experience. I love their fan base. They've got so much energy. If I had to name two players to look out for, it'd be Catalina Uzme and Andrea Staskova. These two players are extremely experienced on the international stage. Catalina Uzme is 34 years old. She's represented Colombia. I would say she's a Colombian legend. She played in 3 Olympics and 3 World Cups. And so if we talk about someone with experience playing in big tournaments and in big games, that is Catalina Uzme, and that's exactly what you'd want. for someone in Champions League. And then Andrea Staskova, she's younger, she's 24, but she previously played for Juventus when Juventus was in Champions League. So she's got Champions League experience. And so when you think about some of these younger, more inexperienced Turkish players, I think they're definitely going to be looking to and leaning on Uzme and Staskova to help them in this group stage match. When it comes to a match prediction, I got to go with Lyon for the win. Now, next in the group is Roma versus Wolfsburg. I'm very excited to see this matchup. These two teams actually faced each other, I want to say 2 years ago in group stage when they drew together. Wolfsburg had the slight edge. Roma and Wolfsburg drew the first match, and then Wolfsburg won the second one 4-2. But that was 2 years ago, and I think a lot has changed, especially for Wolfsburg. I think they are worse this now than they were 2 years ago. They lost Eva Pyer, their top goal scorer, top striker, I should say, and they lost Lena Oberdorf to Bayern, their German rivals. And so I think it'll be interesting to see how Wolfsburg does. They had a very disappointing Champions League last year. They didn't even make it out of qualifiers. They lost to Paris FC. They've added a few players. I would say the main ones being Sarai Linder, Janina Minja, and Lynette Berenstein. Let's see how that goes. I don't think Lynette Berenstein is as clinical as Pyer is in front of net. And so, but she could prove me wrong. So we'll see. In terms of Roma, this is the third year they've made it to Champions League. And I think they've had two very good first seasons. Of course, in the first year, they made it to the knockout stages, which is incredible. They faced Barcelona. They did very well at home against Barcelona in the quarterfinals. But it's Barcelona. So, of course, they lost. But what a first year for them. And then last year, they were in what I would consider the group of death with Bayern, PSG, and Ajax. For Roma to get points from those games, I think was incredible. I think they're going to come into this tournament feeling confident based on their past performances in Champions League. Between Roma and Wolfsburg, I really don't know. In terms of this matchup, I'm going to give a boring response and say they're going to draw. It is happening in Rome, and so maybe they have the slight edge, Roma, but I'm going to say it's a draw because I really think these two teams are quite close in terms of how they match up. Now, the next games on Tuesday in the afternoon for me, will be Chelsea versus Real Madrid, Twente versus Celtic. So we're starting off with my beloved Chelsea. Oh, they're playing Real Madrid again. This is the third year in a row that these two teams have been put together in a group. I think we're all sick of it at this point. So far, up until this point, Chelsea has had the upper hand. Real Madrid has not been able to beat them yet. And so if you're a Chelsea fan, you start to get a little bit nervous because at some point, a team eventually is able to figure it out. And if there was ever a year for Real Madrid to figure it out versus Chelsea, I think this would be it. They made a lot of moves this offseason all across the board, from the forward line, midfield to defense. I've actually been really impressed with the moves that Real Madrid made, especially in the defensive back line. They basically cleaned house. They brought in Maëlle Leclerc from France. I believe she's playing with Montpellier. They brought in Maria Mendes from Levante. They got Shea Garcia as well, who was playing for Atletico Madrid. And so these are really strong defenders that they brought in, which I think they really needed to upgrade that position. And then, of course, in the midfield position, they also upgraded. They're bringing in Melanie Leupolz, who I'm still very sad that she's no longer part of Chelsea. But for Real Madrid, what a signing for them, getting Leupolz in as well as Engeldahl. And then up front, you got Alba Redondo, who was one of the two key strikers for Levante. Of course, the other being Myra Ramirez on Chelsea. And so, yeah, I've been impressed with the moves that Real Madrid made. They had a very disappointing Champions League last year. They finished dead last with 1 point. And I think it's safe to say they're probably not going to finish with 1 point this year. I do think they're going to be doing a lot better. Now, who are they facing? They're facing Chelsea. Similar to Real Madrid, they've also had a bunch of changes happening this past off season. The biggest one being at the top, Sonia Bonpastor has come in. She's the new Chelsea head coach. If there's ever a coach that could replace the famous M&As, it would be Sonia Bonpastor. She's not only won Champions League as a coach, she's also won it as a player. And if you're Chelsea, the Champions League title, that is the one sort of elusive trophy that is missing from their cabinet. And so this is what they want. And Sonia Bonpastor has come in and she wants to try and help deliver that for them. And so I'm very excited to see how Chelsea does. They've started the season off already. They've only played 2 games. Their most recent game was against Crystal Palace, where they won a resounding 7-0, 6 different goal scorers. What I've been most impressed with Chelsea is when they initially lost Sam Kerr and Mia Fischel, essentially in a matter of 2 weeks, a lot of people were concerned about where goals were going to come from. And it makes sense. Chelsea has heavily relied on Sam Kerr for a while now. And so it's hard to see where the goals were going to come from, but players stepped up last season. And so far this year, we're still continuing to see players step up. And so I'm no longer feeling concerned about where goals are going to come from. I think for Chelsea, for me, the concern is in the back line. Defensively, sometimes they look a little bit shaky. Even against Crystal Palace had their moments where they broke Chelsea's defensive line, actually got shots off, and they just happened to miss the post. I think if it had been a more clinical side, these may have been goals, and Champions League is the top of the top. And so I think that is something that Chelsea needs to clean up. But in terms of this matchup, I'm going to go with I could easily see this being a draw, but I got to go with my team. I got to go with Chelsea. They're at home under the lights at Stamford Bridge. They have Real Madrid's number so far. And I don't think that's going to end on Tuesday. I think they're going to be able to get the win, but I think it's going to be close. I think it's going to be difficult. I think Real Madrid is going to put up a good fight. Okay, what is the last matchup that'll be happening on Tuesday? That is FC Twente versus Celtic. Now, both these teams, it is their first time qualifying for the tournament. So once again, congratulations to them. Now, when it comes to Twente, I really love watching these Dutch teams play. I think they often have a style that works well for Champions League and can cause teams problems. Unfortunately, I'm a little bit disappointed in the fact that, they've lost a few players that helped them get to this point. And so it would have been really cool to be able to see this team with those players. Over the past couple of years, they've lost players like Daphne Van Domselaar, who's of course the goalkeeper for Arsenal now. They lost Marissa Olasagers, who now plays for Brighton. Finakama has moved on and plays for Wolfsburg. And of course, Vicky Kaptein, who now plays for Chelsea, left them as well. And so it'll be interesting to see how they can do after losing some of these key pieces. But I think they're still going to be a tough opponent. I don't think they are going to allow teams to just walk over them. Now, in terms of Celtic, I'd say quite similar in the sense that, look, it's their first year qualifying. It's obviously not going to be very easy. I actually spoke with the Celtic head coach after the draw, and she was just talking about the fact that she's just going to be relishing in the experience and the opportunity and having her players gain exposure to these other teams, these other playing styles and environments. Like, it's a learning experience for teams like Celtic. Look, I don't think there are any easy groups, but I do think there are some groups that are tougher than others. And I think if you're Celtic and Twente, maybe you're a little bit happy that you got into Group B, not because Chelsea and Real Madrid are easy opponents, but look, last year, Real Madrid and Chelsea were expected to be the 2 favorites to make it out of their group, and Chelsea took care of business, but Real Madrid finished with 1 point. And so if you're Celtic and you're Twente, maybe you're thinking you could try and steal a point. Maybe you're thinking something similar can happen. You take your chances. And so, yeah, it'll be interesting to see. Obviously, Real Madrid is not the same team. And I think you got to respect the fact that they've improved. They also have Caroline Weir back, which cannot be understated how important she is to that club. And so, yeah, I don't think Real Madrid will get 1 point this year, but still, if you're Twente and Celtic, you're probably happy that maybe you got into this group and not Group A, C, and D. So yeah, the last thing I wanted to just touch on was all of this controversy that happened with Chelsea's match. Of course, if you're not aware of it, Chelsea was scheduled to play Manchester United in the WSL this weekend, basically on Sunday. But then the Champions League schedule came out and they were scheduled to play Real Madrid on Tuesday. But there are very few games that take place, at least in women's football, that happen with a 48-hour break. I mean, if you're Chelsea, you pretty much would be going into the Champions League matchup versus Real Madrid with no preparation because you need a recovery day. And so you're probably not practicing on the Monday. And so you're going into a match versus Real Madrid cold. That's just not good. And for player welfare, it's just not good. And so that game, specifically Manchester United versus Chelsea, was rightfully postponed. There was a lot of people upset about this. I think obviously the fans for both teams, you paid for tickets. Many fans are traveling in. They probably paid for accommodation. And so to cancel the game within a week's notice is pretty bad, is pretty terrible. So I feel bad for the fans, of course. And then you've got other teams like Arsenal who are now feeling like, well, if you're canceling Chelsea's game, then you should cancel our Sunday game, because now that puts us at a disadvantage for next Saturday when Arsenal face Chelsea. Because you're going to have a situation where Arsenal are going to be playing 3 games basically between Sunday to Saturday, whereas Chelsea are only going to be playing 1 game in that time frame, or I guess 2 games if you count the Arsenal one. Look, this was an extremely avoidable situation. UEFA had their group stage match dates published from last year. So in my opinion, it's inexcusable for a domestic league to mess up and schedule league matches that has the potential to be 2 days before a Champions League date they would have been aware of. This easily could have been Arsenal or City had UEFA scheduled them on Tuesday. And in fact, Arsenal does have a similar issue. The league earlier this week announced that Arsenal's November 10 match versus Brighton was being moved to Friday, November 8th, because Arsenal's November 12th Champions League match would cause another player welfare issue. And Chelsea has this same issue again in December that the league will need to change as well. This is all a bad look for the WPLL, in my opinion. It was reported on Friday that Chelsea, Arsenal, and Manchester City all requested to play on Sunday, October 6th, even though they knew the Champions League schedule. But in my opinion, the league or the WPLL ultimately have the final say. And so I don't even really care what the teams requested. The WPLL are accountable for what happens in their league, and they need to schedule their games in a way that limits unnecessary postponements. I'll also say the decision to schedule League Cup qualifiers the week before Champions League was also an error by the WPL for me, because this prevented Chelsea and Manchester United's match being moved from the Sunday to the Friday, the same way Arsenal's match versus Brighton next month was able to move up to Friday. It's a big learning lesson for a new leadership group. I understand the desire to want to have big matches broadcast on TV, but that can't trump ignoring potential conflicts with Champions League. So I hope next year we don't see anything similar happen again. Anyways, thanks so much for watching part 1 of my Champions League preview. Please keep an eye out for part 2, where I'll talk about the Wednesday matchups for Group C and D. Let me know in the comments what you think about Groups A and B. Do you have any predictions on who you think will win the Tuesday games, as well as any predictions on who will be top 2 in the groups? I'd love to hear your thoughts. As always, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any other videos. Thanks again for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.